This is the PSD 1 year later party. We're actually united here in the Betacowork building in Brussels. My name is Toon, Vanagt. It's hard to see behind the mask. Hello everybody, I'll keep it on the rest of the evening. Our audience is wearing masks. We've just opened the windows for fresh air, so we try to do everything to be compliant with the COVID rules. And tonight we're going to learn if the banks have been compliant with PSD2 rules. We have a great panel of speakers lined up for you. We're going to keep it at a really speedy rhythm, 5 minutes for each, and there's a debate afterwards. And we really look forward to all of you online to ask you questions. Use the chat. If you can come live in these sessions, I'll bring a mic to the people in the audience. If you ask a question, you'll present yourself. But so without further ado, 1 year PSD2, we look forward to learning from all our speakers what they have learned over the last year. And our first speaker is Anni Mykkänen from the EBF, so the European Banking Federation, if you don't need to correct me on that. And I would like to invite you on stage here. And you're allowed to come without a mask because I'm wearing one, and you can take the stage. You have the slides, we'll go to the next one. So everybody sees the slide online, so I don't need to repeat this, but in this order, we have Jean-Gabriel Vonno from Tink, Reinout Temmerman, who is from our regulator, the National Bank of Belgium. We have Marc Lainez from Ibanity, Jean-Gabriel from Banking SDK, and we'll do a debate afterwards. So watch out, take good note, take your questions down, and you can ask them to our speakers afterwards. So Anni, go ahead.
Let's wait for the slides.
Yes, great.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me here today. I'm Anni Mykkänen. I'm Senior Policy Advisor at the European Banking Federation. So just to clarify, the European Banking Federation is the umbrella organization of all national banking federations and associations. And slightly to manage the expectations, we do policy. So in plain language, I'm a banking lobbyist. We do not implement APIs and we don't do compliance for banks. They do it for themselves and they are responsible for that themselves. So just to, you have heard all this a million times, I think. The PSD2 objectives, just to repeat that one more time in case somebody forgot. The main objectives were obviously to enhance competition, innovation and security in the payments area in the EU. And the competition and innovation part was mainly done by opening up of payment accounts to third-party providers for new services, such as payment initiation and account information. And the aspect of security is dealt by the application of strong customer authentication for electronic payments. Just to do a bit of history and also to show you how long it has actually taken us to be here today. And it doesn't even start in January 2016, as it's stated on the slide. I mean, it starts in 2013, when the Commission proposed the revision of PSD. So it's been a while. There has been a lot of work done in between. But anyway, I think it's a long journey, and I think this demonstrated. So in 2016, the PSD2 entered into force. PSD2 had to be transposed by January 2018 by all the member states, as it's a directive. That was delayed in quite a number of member states, actually. So by 2018, there were quite a number of member states who didn't do that. But I checked the Commission website today. We are at 100% transposition. And the juicy bit of PSD2 is, of course, that was published in March 2018, entered into force exactly 1 year ago. And there is a delay on part of that RTS on the application of SCA for card-based online payments.
I'm going to interfere for 1 second, because if you join this session, you supposedly know what RTS stands for, right?
Regulatory technical standards.
The regulatory technical standards, and everybody knows what SCA stands for. Yeah, oh, we can get into a choir here, right? Although it's not loud. Don't say it too loud. Keep it a little bit to yourselves. Yeah. So these are of course the acronyms that you will be hearing a lot tonight. So very important. If you're here, you know about them. But maybe for some people who just tuned in, this is at the core of many of the discussions going on around PSD2. So
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. And just to highlight also all the different and numerous parties that are involved in defining more in detail the technical obligations under the RTSs. So the European Banking Authority has a big role in this. drafting the RTSs and all the other opinions, guidelines, Q&A, API, working group documentation, etc. So there is a wealth of paper that has been produced to define what exactly the obligations under the RTSs are. Also, the European Commission has a clear interest in making sure that the objectives, the political objectives that were stated, are actually implemented by the market. So we have been, as EBF, we have been part of numerous stakeholder roundtables, high and lower level, and all sorts of stakeholder dialogue. There was an API evaluation group that published a list of recommended functionalities after some heavy debates. The ECB, although it's not implementing or involved in implementing EU regulation, has the Euro Retail Payments Board that has discussed these issues also. And then there are the different API standardization initiatives such as Berlin Group, etc., that more detail the technical requirements for API. So just to show you that there are a lot of people involved in this. So we are gathered here today to celebrate the one-year anniversary of access to accounts. So what can we say about where we are now? I mean, from my perspective, I think it's fair to say that it's been more of a transition. There was not a big bang. I remember 1 year ago, we were sort of wondering what was going to happen on 14th of September. I think it was a Saturday though, so after that. But there was no big bang. I'm not aware of any massive bankruptcy of TPPs. I'm not aware of any major uncompliance by ASPSP. So overall, the access to accounts has been established by one way or another. I'm sure there are plenty of discussions as to the actual implementations that can take place and that are still taking place, but broadly we have implemented the basic elements of access to accounts. And then there is still much ongoing work. There is, quite importantly, I think, the implementation and the enforcement of the most recent EBA opinion that is about obstacles. That's a very important opinion, dated from June this year. There is no actual deadline in the actual opinion stated on by when ASPSPs need to implement it, but I think the end of the year is something that the Belgian supervisor has stated, and I think end of the year is also something that the other NCAs are sort of converging to. Importantly, the European Data Protection Board is working on guidelines on the interplay between PSD2 and GDPR. And I want to highlight this because as EBF and as the broader industry, we have quite some concerns about the content of those draft guidelines. There are instances that suggest that ASPSPs could end up in a position where they somehow have to redact the data that they're able to transmit to TPPs. Especially when it concerns silent party data and special categories of personal data. We don't like that. We don't want another API complication implementation and something that's technically impossible or very difficult to implement. And I think for TPPs, and I think this is one of the issues that we will be able to agree on, is that as TPPs, you will not want this either. If you're an AISP, what do you do if you have not all the data that the PSU is able to access directly by the bank? So I think there's a problem there. They're under consultation until Wednesday, so please submit your response. Obviously, there's the ongoing EBA Q&A process. That a lot of questions have been answered, but that's something that will keep on ongoing and will keep EBA busy in the coming weeks and months, and as I said, the SCA implementation partly is still ongoing. And then some considerations about where we might be heading. I know for some of you this might sound like science fiction because you're still working very much on the actual PSD2 and API implementation, but we're very much considering also sort of what's next. On the PSD2 baseline, I would hope that with the latest ABA opinion on obstacles, the market can have a sufficient understanding of what it means to be compliant with PSD2. I really hope, because there's been a lot of back and forth discussion between banks and TPPs on what are the actual compliance requirements. So I'm really hoping the EBA opinion can be established the baseline more clearly. Then further than PSD2, how can the market move towards open banking, open finance, or at least enhance the outcomes of PSD2? And here I would sort of advocate for the work of the Euro Retail Payments Board SEPA API Access Scheme that we have been involved in. The ERPB is the high-level sort of forum of the ECB that deals with retail payments. And as part of that work, we have been involved with TPPs as well in establishing what could be a scheme that goes beyond PSD2. So, for instance, offering a payment guarantee, access to maybe other accounts, although that might come later in the game, on the assumption that there can be benefits for both parties. So not only just one party opening up their infrastructure to other without any counterpart, I would say, but there is the understanding that such a scheme could sort of provide benefits to all parties. The work has been paused for various reasons. I think one of the real reasons is that PSD2 implementation was very much still ongoing and is ongoing. But we're very much hoping, and as EBF, we're supporting that work is put forward, because I think we do need to see more collaboration in the market, I think. And then there's the question of API harmonization. This is brought up, I think, on occasion, whether more harmonization is needed between the different initiatives, or some sort of, one API standard maybe. If that is needed, who should do that? Who should write that? I think those are questions that are currently out there. And then in terms of the regulatory landscape, what we may see and will see in the coming months, there are some quite important European Commission initiatives that we're looking to see in the coming weeks. Most importantly, the retail payment strategy, which will be sort of putting forward the Commission strategy for payments for the coming years. There is an underlying theme, I think, of putting more emphasis to European actors in the payment space. Then there's the digital finance strategy that may or may not include some forms of, open finance, or saying something about, well, how do you sort of open the financial system more broadly, and how do you deal with data sharing within the financial sector? And then there's the data strategy that has already been published, but the different actions that stem from that data strategy that really aim to put in place a more sort of broader data economy in Europe, where data can be shared not only within one sector, but hopefully also between different sectors. And then last but least, it wouldn't be fun if there wasn't another PSD review in the making. The official, because an EU legislation always has to state the date for the review, so the official date for PSD review is January next year. It's not going to be like there will be a proposal in January next year, but I believe next year is where the Commission will slowly initiate at least the review. So there's more fun to come, for sure. And I will stop there, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you've all seen, this was the opinion and the way that the bank sees this going forward. Many of you in this room are hands-on, have been trying to get this to work, and previously some banks have not fully embraced open banking to the extent that we all hope for, to put it mildly. And so our next speaker is among those that try to get it to work across Europe. So I'm Vonno, he works for Tink, and they are one of those parties that technically tries to even go above the TTPs to make sure you can aggregate all these country-specific norms. And he'll tell more about that and their view on where this is going. So next birthday party is from you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Toon, and thank you to Fintech Belgium for hosting us and having us here today. Once again, my name is Jean-Gabriel. I am the research director for Tink. And what that means is I am in a very fortunate position to get to look at how PSD2 is evolving, how open banking is evolving across Europe. And I get to conduct surveys and then write papers on that. So just before the deadline last year, you may recall a number of articles issued by Tink indicating the quality of the APIs, the quality of the sandboxes, and basically submitting an open letter to the authorities to not exempt all the open banking APIs or all the PSD2 APIs by September 14, because in that situation, we would have had a very disastrous outcome. So we're quite happy that many bank authorities have actually been quite, open to feedback, listening to the market. And I'm also here to share a little bit about what we're seeing in Europe and also some details on the Belgian market. So let me first introduce Tink a little bit more. So exactly, Tink is a registered and licensed account information service provider and payment initiation service provider, headquartered out of Sweden, but with passports to operate across Western Europe. We're fortunate that we've collected almost 200 million euros in funding, which has allowed us to grow the organization to almost 300 people and recently make 2 acquisitions. And that now allows us to basically create bank connections to over 2,500 banks, allowing us to reach almost 250 million consumer and current accounts across Europe. So in many cases, we're operating as a TSP, a technical service provider, to other licensed institutions, be it tier 1 enterprises or smaller fintechs that are just getting started, may have just registered for a license or registered for account information services, and are looking to quickly onboard and quickly expand across Europe. And we're providing the tools for them to do that. Basically, the next generation of financial services. So when we talk about open banking, I think it's quite important that we understand that open banking did not start with PSD2. As Anni already pointed out, PSD2 was drafted back in, or proposed back in 2013. Tink was founded back in 2012. And even before that, there were organizations already accessing account information and initiating payments. So Tink in 2012 was already operating as an account information service provider and payment initiation service provider. And already back then, the shift started. So the shift of open banking started way before PSD2. And we expect that it will continue to evolve over the next 1, maybe 2 decades. So we're moving on the shift from closed banking to open banking, from monolithic relationships between financial service provider and customer to basically the democratization of that service, where the customer is in control of his own data and can pick and choose services that are most appropriate and most affordable based on his or her preferences. And one of the things I get to look at is also look at the amount of investments that's going into this space. And I was blown away after doing a survey earlier just this year, just before Corona surged, but right about the time when the feedback from the market started to come back that the PSD2 API and the progress of those APIs weren't as good or as fast as we were expecting. And we found out that the median investment across Europe is in the range of 50 to 100 million euros. Now, this includes both capital investments as well as operating expenditures for maintaining the APIs, consultancy fees, legal fees, a lot of fees included. But you can just imagine what the impact is on the GDP of a country if financial institutions are investing this type of money. And it's only actually an indication. Because if you look on average, and we look across Europe, we actually see in financial institutions, especially the larger ones, 45% have indicated that they're investing over 100 million euros in just maintaining this open banking proposition. The Belgian market, it's actually a market where we found relatively smaller budgets for their open banking proposition. So more in the range between 1 million and 50 million euros. But looking at budgets or looking at these investments alone just gives you one point of view. I always like to compare to other proxies and variables. So we also wanted to look at what the growth rates are of these expenditures. Just looking at comparing the European average to the Belgian average. So in Europe, 63% across all countries indicated that they're growing their open banking budgets. Belgium actually was 71% respondents indicating that they're growing their open banking budgets, just under the UK. And at the time, when I found this statistic, I hypothesized, well, probably a large share of these investments are going to go into the improvements of the PSD2 APIs, because earlier this year, actually, we were quite disappointed with the quality of the PSD2 APIs in the Belgian market. And I think there are many associations active in the Belgian market that have been explicitly vocal about this. So this is what we've seen over the past couple months, and I am super excited to be able to share this. So when we look at the manual refresh success rates, so actually the process of users completing the SEA process, so the two-factor authentication in order to provide a third-party access to account information or in order to initiate a payment. We've seen improvements from a 35% success rate in May to 93% success for the top tier 1 banks in Belgium today. And that's month-to-date statistics. So this is statistics based on September to September 13th. This is fantastic because it shows that we are improving as a country, that the tier 1 banks' investments are paying off. But we're not saying that we're done here, because still, even with these banks, even the banks that are showing improved statistics, they're still not compliant. We assess compliance based on 3 primary categories: API performance, user experience, and data parity, and all benchmarked against the customer interface. And although we are seeing now improvements on the customer experience, because that's really the primary measurement here of the SEA, when the manual refresh, you're really measuring the customer experience. How easy is it, or how hard is it in order to give a third-party access to account information? Although we've seen improvements here, with some banks moving from 20 screens to only 5, we're still not on par when it comes to data parity or API performance. But the last part is improving, and I think a good proxy for that is the background refresh. So Article 36 indicates that an account information service provider has the right to continue to access account information for 90 days after consent is given by the payment service user. And we see here that the performance of these APIs during the background refresh has been improving from 86% back in May to almost 100% today. So that actually puts it on par with the customer interface, which we can measure through reverse engineered APIs. So just to give you a little sense of how third-party providers are using this technology, using these APIs in order to create value for customers, because ultimately it's all about the customers, right? The definition for open banking that we use is that open banking is the exchange of data and services between financial institutions and third-party providers in order to deliver enhanced capabilities and experiences to the market. In the end, it's all about the customer. In the Belgian market, there are a number of examples of tier 1 banks that have already launched multi-banking services. But I want to bring your attention to some of the bordering countries. For instance, in the Netherlands, ABN AMRO has been working for Tink for quite a while to launch a personal financial management app. Most interestingly, they have over 750,000 users today, have recently launched subscription management services. And any bank customer can use it. So it's not just for ABN AMRO customers, it's also for ING, Bank, Rabobank, any other bank customer to use this application. And what this allows them to do is to become the preferred interface for the retail banking space, and to start promoting or reselling additional financial services on top of that based on the behavior analytics. But account information services isn't just limited to the consolidation of account information for the purpose of a personal financial management app or money management in general. We're also seeing other types of applications. What I really like about this example from Qliro, which is basically a financial services company in the Nordics, they're using account aggregation to streamline the onboarding process. So rather than having new users, new customers fill out forms, they simply ask them to authenticate against the bank and allow Tink to fetch their account information, their account holder name, to verify with the customer name, as well as their IBAN numbers, so that those details, which are extremely important, are not incorrectly filled in. And so this improves the customer experience, it reduces risk, and most importantly, it increases conversion. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the statistics for this company in particular, but I know of 2 other examples that are working with Tink. One has increased conversion by 150%, and the other by 45% by just introducing this in the onboarding process. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what a differentiator this can be. And in the onboarding process, this is also just one example. We can go into credit scoring, risk analysis, et cetera, et cetera. All of that are also account information services. And another great example I like, and that's a little bit outside the scope of what traditional financial services institutions do, but it's moving into the realm of loyalty. I know, Toon, you're a big fan of the cashback proposition of PSD2, but one of the things that we're seeing GoLoyal do, a recent startup, is they're building loyalty programs with very well-known merchants in the retail and merchant space. And they're working with them and building a loyalty program not based on your credit card expenses, not based on a stamp or a QR code, based on your transactions on your bank accounts. And that allows them to actually prompt real-time point-of-sale offers. You're in the Starbucks right now, hey, here's a discount for that donut, for instance. Or hey, you're close, you just made a purchase at Brussels Central Station, here's a free coffee on us, for instance. This allows them to get much closer to the customer and really transform that experience with the merchants. So, final thoughts. Right. So, what I've explained here, what I've shared with you here now is that, clearly we just at the start of the open banking transformation. It's really at the heart of the digital transformation that many financial institutions are currently executing. We're investing a tremendous amount. These investments are growing. And I expect this to continue to accelerate for the next 10 to 20 years, especially as open banking becomes a global theme and not just something present within the European market. And finally, I think the number of use cases and areas to invest are endless, but it all comes down to one thing, and that's thinking about your customer. It's not about you, it's about your customer. So with that, I want to thank all of you, and I look forward to the discussion later on. Potentially some of the news on the SCA and the metrics would be surprising, so I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
I had actually picked a Western theme, and the title was Once Upon a Time in Western Europe. And I had a nice picture of an actual Mexican standoff, because this is a little bit what I thought the situation was last year. You had the regulator, the TPPs, and the banks, and we were all pointing guns at each other, not really knowing what's going to happen. And I wanted to have that presentation then focus on 3 things, and it was PSD2, the good, the bad, and the other. Obviously, Western theme, I had to go with it. So let's focus on the good first, because I think that's quite important. What we saw, and bear in mind that we have several customers, not only in Belgium, but we focus the numbers on Belgium here, that we saw since last year an increase of 620% in traffic towards, in total numbers of accounts that we are managing through our platform. So it's a 6-fold in 8 months. We expect it to be 10-fold afterwards. That's okay, go ahead, that's okay. So that's the good news. And then I had a nice split of what it means in terms of B2B and B2C, because we do have that split. We do have customers consuming those accounts for B2B perspectives and also B2C use cases. And what we see, obviously, is that the top tier banks of Belgium, the 4 largest banks, account for a little bit more than 80% of the traffic in B2C and 79% in B2B. And then you still have the neobanks, and by neobanks I mean I'm talking about Revolut, obviously. I'm also talking about N26. Even Ion Bank is counted in the neobanks. We see about 3 and 4% respectively in the 2 different segments. So that we see that there's also a presence from the smallest banks in terms of open banking that is still quite substantial. Now, I also had another point about what was positive, which is the fact that we have quite
we have seen quite a big improvement on the quality of the Belgian banks' support channels, because that was one of the major complaints that was there last year by the TPP community, I would say, is that the support was not reactive enough or not useful enough. And we saw that there was a drastic improvement there. So thank you for that, because we really saw the case resolution going much faster and much better. So that was the good. Now let's talk about the bad. Okay. So we regularly see outages of those APIs and problems occurring as soon as they launch a new version. So on several occasions this year, we've really seen the API completely crash right after a deployment of the bank, or some components being out, which is obviously an issue, because you always have a downtime for when they deploy, and then you know that there's going to be a couple of days where it's not really going to work as you expect. So it's always an outage of several days, I would say, when there's a new version. Now, it doesn't happen for all banks. We connect to more than 20 banks in Belgium, including small ones. It's not for all banks, obviously, but it happens on a regular basis. All right, so that's a long slide. So I'm going to continue. All right, so another bad thing, I would say, is that the legal entity name is not the same as the product name. And that's something that a lot of banks have forgotten about. Also, they are limiting the access in terms of SCA to the entity name, or I would say the license number. But if a company has multiple products, and you have a customer that conducts SCA on one product, and then wants to also link their account on another product of your company, then the SCA that they made the first time is invalidated. So most banks don't account for the fact that companies may have multiple products, which can be a problem when you're a bank and you're acting as a TPP, because you may have a lot of different products, and you want your customers to be able to hook them up anywhere. So that's a real issue today that we see on the market. Because then you're going to have to ask your customers to choose one product over another. They cannot have both. So this idea that you have to limit SCA to a license number is really wrong and bad for the ecosystem. There are still several compliance gaps, so I'm not going to come back on this one. But for us, also pretty active in B2B, we miss bulk payment a lot. This is, for us, the biggest obstacle to having really good B2B use cases in PSD2 is the absence of bulk payments in a majority of Belgian banks. We have some Belgian banks that have it. Don't get me wrong, we have some of them, but not the largest and not everyone. Now the ugly, and those are kind of a little bit some more stories. Unprepared QTSP. So as a TPP, you need to get a qualified certificate in order to connect to those APIs. The problem is that last year, when we tried to get a certificate, most QTSPs were not ready. And even when they decided to start, there were errors in the filing process, We received non-compliant certificates, so certificates with wrong information in them, rendering them completely non-compliant. And we actually had to tell the qualified certificate provider that those certificates were non-compliant and point them to the specification, the ETSI specification, saying it was not. And also the infamous, some of you may have gone through this one, the infamous Belgian license dots problems. The issue is that in a compliant license number for a TPP in Belgium, there are dots that are within your enterprise number. And in a lot of banks, they were not accepting dots inside the field that you see in the certificate. They would not know how to interpret it. They were rejecting this certificate as being non-compliant. So we lost months on this issue trying to figure it out. Even had to include the National Bank in the mix, by the way, to get it fixed. But yeah, eventually it got there. But again, it slowed down really a lot, the adoption of PSD2 last year and beginning of this year. Now, I'm not going to share as optimistic numbers about SCA as Tink, unfortunately, even in Belgium. Also because, again, we're doing a lot of B2B. So when you look at the statistics altogether, we can see that the success rate of SCA is only 39%. So when we send a customer to the bank, only 39% come back. Also, because it can have many reasons, obviously. It can be that the SCA method is not adapted to the use case. Sometimes you're on mobile and we ask you to scan a QR code with your mobile app that's on your phone, so that's not going to really work. Sometimes also the bank app actually crashes. Or the website just shows an error. Now the error can be very different. So you can really have an actual crash, but also, for instance, especially in B2B use cases, there are so many mandate configuration on account that are possible that the banks have not thought of everything. And in a B2B use case, you can have really complex mandates on accounts. So that's something that was not really foreseen. So if you look really at the numbers, B2C plus B2B combined through our platform, we only get a 39% success rate on SCA for Belgium. So there's still room for improvement. We see this improving indeed, especially on B2C, but on B2B, it's still quite complicated. And sometimes we have to exchange lengthy emails with the banks to figure out what's going on, which is maybe normal. And then we also had one very ugly story twice with the same bank here in Belgium of account history being mixed between users. And that is the kind of thing that when you see it, you start sweating because you're trying to figure out if it's your fault or if there's a problem at the source of the data. Fortunately, for everybody involved as well, and some of them are in the room, the error came from the bank. So they were actually mixing transactions from two customers when the call was made pretty much at the same time. So it's a pure concurrency issue, we would say. But a customer A would see customer B's transactions, or at least some transactions in customer A's history, and vice versa. So it's something that then you have to really clean up in all the chain, meaning also our customers as TSP that use us. So it costs a lot of money and a lot of time to get there. So the bottom line, and again, you don't really necessarily see this picture, but that's a picture of a canyon, and there's a caravan, and there's an ambush. And we feel a little bit like that. We feel like that caravan trying to, push forward, and each time we do something, there's kind of an ambush waiting for us. All right. So my final statement is that we can see that it's improving, but it's not improving fast enough. So thank you very much.
Our last speaker, and then we move to the debate, is Yves Bovin. He is here to represent Pay Belgium. I believe you're also linked to Cake, right? Yes. You can tell more about that, Yves. But it's the artist formerly known as A78, which was the name of the Belgian operators that needed to have a license 7 or 8 to do account aggregation or payment initiation. They are now named Pay Belgium, and together with them we co-organize this 1-year anniversary. So we look forward to what Pay Belgium has to say as I would say, the sector, the industry representatives of that niche of players. So go ahead.
Thank you. So Pay Belgium represents the payment institutions in Belgium or passported in Belgium. And like I said, Pay Belgium is the successor of A78. These are some of our members. So why we established Pay Belgium, or why we established A78 in the first place? We saw it at the end of 2019 that APIs were not ready, why they should have been on the 14th of September. So we united all the payment institutions in Belgium with license 7 and or 8, that's why the name A78 of course. And we started bilateral discussions with all the banks. We had meetings with, well, not all the banks, we had meetings with 14 banks in March and April. Some of them before lockdown, some of them after lockdown. We wrote reports of these discussions, of these meetings, and we discussed these reports also with the National Bank. We saw that there was a huge difference between the sandbox and real life. We saw that banks were testing their APIs in sandbox, but yeah, like I said, there's a difference in real life, and that's why A78 came in to test these APIs with several thousands of users. And then we saw different things. Sandbox, you can compare it with a car. You can test the car on the parking, but afterwards you have to go on the highway, and then yeah, that's a different thing than stepping in on the parking. So what we saw, and unfortunately still see is that some banks have no correct counterpart information or no counterpart information. I think we all agree that counterpart information is one crucial thing in transaction data. Some banks only give us 90 days of history, while they should give us the same history as in their own channel, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Some of them only give 90 days. There's one bank that provides a QR code on a mobile phone, and then you have to scan that QR code with that mobile phone. So you need another mobile phone to scan the QR code to authenticate your bank account. There's one bank who has a list of mobile phones that can be connected to the API. So if you buy a new phone that's not on that list, you have to wait until your phone is on that list before connecting to your bank account. There's one bank giving the oldest transactions first. So you have to scroll down for a few years to see the newest transactions. Yeah, we do that like this, they said. There's one bank where minors are not allowed. So if minors want to authenticate, they get a technical issue. So it's called, there is a technical issue. And if you ask the bank, they say, oh no, minors are not allowed. But those minors are allowed at that bank to use Payconic. So they can pay, but they cannot view. Account information is only viewing. Payconic is paying. There are also banks who have an expiration before the 90 days. You know, every 90 days you have to authenticate again, but sometimes we see connection get lost after 30, 40, 50 days. Why? We don't know. There was one bank, it's solved now, who had a phishing banner on top of the place where you had to put in the code. With the Digi card, with the Digi reader, the Maxke, you have to put in the challenge, PIN code, you get a code, and you have to put in that code. But where you have to put in that code, there was a giant banner. So it was not possible. It took 5 weeks to disappear this banner. There are banks with poor stability, fortunately. There's one bank who decided 3 times already to do an update of their API in the weekends. So on Monday, all users got disconnected. So they had to connect again. And with that bank, not all authentication methods are supported. So they had to use the well-known Maxke, the card reader. So the card reader with again, challenge and PIN code, and then again you have the method. Then that's for entering, then again for allowing, for giving the consent, again you have to put in the challenge, the PIN code, etc. So you know that every time this happens, we lose, or our members, they lose half of their users, of course. Our members are, most of them are startups. Most of the members, TPPs, are startups. And what we see is that, is it okay that if a startup starts developing the product, and after 1 or 3 years of developing, they're ready to go, they're ready to launch the product. And what we say now is stop, wait for 1 more year, and then you're ready to go. Then you can launch your product. That's what happened in Belgium. TPPs had to wait 1 year to properly launch their product. And it's a pity, because the consumers, they want to use the TPPs, they want to use the innovating products, innovating services, but the consumers are also the customers of the banks. So banks are blocking their customers using innovating services. And those innovating services are on top of the banking services. So that's a pity. But there is hope. We see a lot of improvements. I'm glad hear from Tink that there's a lot of improvements. Ibanity also says it. We also see a lot of improvement in the last couple of months. We did a second round of reports just before the summer. We had discussions with some banks, not all of them, unfortunately. But we did have discussions. We also see the publication of the EBA on the 4th of June, and also National Bank is doing a lot of efforts behind the scenes to get everything ready. And we hope that at the end of this year, there's a deadline from the NBB, 31st of December. So we hope by then that all the APIs should be ready, let's say for more than 90, 95%. 100%, I don't think that will happen, but let's hope for the 95%. Okay.
For everybody online, this is the moment we're going to actually ask all the speakers to take a seat in the front. I'm also going to take the microphone to come around in the audience here, but for all of you, this is quite interesting. There is a chat version on the right side of your screen. We already see some nice comments on there, like this one from Roland Buitens to you, Marc. A nice metaphor. It reminds me of the trigger-happy A79 Wild Bunch.
That's exactly why I picked the Western.
The Western one, okay.
So I remember that remark.
You remember that remark, okay. Do you feel aangesproken, as they say in Dutch, or not at all? I'm going to get a microphone to you, by the way. I think the trigger-happy refers to the complaining about the banks not being compliant. That's how I interpret this.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Of course, a lot of people are complaining that banks are not ready. Especially the users of our members. They want to start using the services of our members. But it's very difficult, especially in the beginning of this year, of course. But we see improvement. It's going better and better, but still there are still some thousands of accounts that do not get connected to the banks.
Okay, great. I'm gonna give you the job like this. So we're gonna, as you know, we're now in COVID countries. So before passing the mic afterwards, I will give you the I would say the pharmacopillon, the special gel désinfectant, locally homegrown around the office here. I'm going to look at the room first, the physical audience. Who has a question from any of the people sitting in front there, or to Reinout of the National Bank sitting in his home office? I'm going to get one, and we're going to get the microphone to you first. If you can quickly say who you are, you can take it off for that. Yes.
Thanks. Temmerman from Asana Consulting. So you mentioned that there's a review coming with PSD2, and it's just a general question to the audience. PSD3, what are your hopes? What are your desires? If there's one outcome that would be coming from this new review, what would that be?
I'm going to go. Please.
Should I?
Yeah, you can do it first, and we're fully compliant. I can start, you can start. Okay, go ahead.
I would say, what are our fears on PSD3? I wouldn't say desires, or as a banking industry, I think we just go with fear. So first of all, maybe there's an expectation that PSD3 would cover, let's say, access to other accounts, such as savings accounts or whatever, because that's not included in PSD2. I don't see that happening as part of PSD3, because it's a payment services directive, and I'm hoping it will stay that way as a payment services directive. So definitely the RTSs will be the focal point of the review. Yeah, I would say, I mean, there will be aspects of both SCA and TPP access to account that will be reviewed. I mean, maybe this is not realistic to hope, but I think what this process has shown is that we're sort of in between in the EU. So we're not fully prescribing, right? It's not fully prescribing exactly what different parties should be doing and should be implementing. It's not some sort of principle-based either, so it's in between. There's a lot of detail that has been clarified, and I think we have to ask ourselves the question, how do we want to proceed with SCA or any other topic? What is really the best way forward? Do we go for more principle-based, we give some targets, and then we let the market, but with full supervision, etc. So that's one of, and one of the key aspects of any PSD review is for the Commission to really look at the market, how it has evolved, because PSD2 was introduced quite a while ago, so it's based on a market that has to be evaluated, what has to be in scope or not. So I think my hope would be for going forward would be to find a way for the market really to maybe dialogue better, to have a different dynamic other than any specific requirement under PSD2. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll give you some more alcohol. And Yves, I'm going to ask you, we have a dynamic going on here, right, between all the players, so we're going to try to keep that for the PSD3. There you go. What is your one wish in PSD3, the biggest thing you would like the market to embrace by then?
Saving accounts.
Saving accounts, information,
credit accounts, meal vouchers, that kind of things. Everything where you pay with
transactional. So transactional data.
Yes, every transactional data.
Okay, thank you for that one. So the big wish is more transactional data. So here you get alcohol first. Yes, but I can keep the mic in front of you while you start giving your biggest wish for 2021. Professional.
Maybe one would be that we embrace the fact that this is a directive that has serious technical impacts, and that would then need to be a bit more precise in what we expect. And also to look at the technical feasibility of some of the aspects. And there I'm also referring a little bit to the 4 times unattended and all that. I mean, those things are almost impossible to really implement in a good way. So that less legal, mumbo jumbo, and a bit more down to earth things, yes.
So same question to Tink, what do you would like to happen next year?
Sure. So so I think we would align with the vision that PSD3 would not be preferable. First of all, because that's going to take another 5, maybe 10 years before something like that will be developed and aligned. And in 10 years, hopefully we'll be past some of the issues that we're facing today. But it's only literally a salt pinch of all the issues that we see across Europe. So what would our preferences be? RTS2, specifically addressing a number of the TPP issues that have been raised even prior to the September 14 deadline, and that relates to the re-authentication after 90 days, relates to the access to account information for PISPs, it relates to a whole series of important issues that would otherwise inhibit this type of innovation that had existed for 2 decades prior to PSD2, but now with the enforcement of PSD2 and the risk of exempting APIs that are not in the spirit of PSD2, basically disrupting existing businesses that have been basically making a living for quite a while. So, and in some cases, millions of users across Europe. So I think for our perspective, and I think for most TPPs, there are several challenges currently with the RTS, and we hope that in a revision or in a review, they will recognize some of these challenges and see to potentially correcting the favor for TPPs.
Yeah, you can pass it on.
Thank you.
In our point of view, we don't have a big history with some customers, but the feedback we got is that they want more transactional data, and data coming from the Visa, MasterCard, and stuff like that. So I would guess that more transactional data is the best match for 21.
That nicely aligns with what Belgium was also asking for. We want more. I'm going to use this nice opportunity, and for the people that have been reading the comments, Reinout has been really active in answering people. So we do have a regulator that is not living in an ivory tower, but is actually reaching out to answer your questions. So thanks again on behalf of Fintech Belgium and Belgium for wanting to join in on that. I'm going to put the mic again so you can address the audience with the first question. What do you as a regulator would like for PSD2 and beyond? It's a bit of a weird question because you actually are in the process of helping to set that. So maybe you can reveal some of your personal opinions on that instead of the national bank to make it very clear. And secondly, there's a question in the board, like, could you share with us an anonymous overview of the current implementation made by the PSP? So I'll leave it to you to which extent you can answer that. To Yves from Belgium, how do you feel on behalf of those that are hurt? And I don't mean in the sense of being hurt, but the one being really punished by not being able to go full-fledged as a business. Would you like to see more fines on that side?
I truly hope that the MBB doesn't need to impose the fines. I hope that the APIs will be ready. I said 95% ready by the end of this year. Also, if the MBB imposes fines, the money goes to the MBB, not to the TPP, so it doesn't matter for us. So we really hope the APIs to get ready.
So we have immediate reaction here, and Reinout says he gives a no. So I'm going to give the mic to.
I mean, if there's one thing that we can add, I mean, looking across Europe, we've seen fragmented positions towards the dedicated interfaces, i.e. the PSD2 APIs that have been provided by the ASPs, the banks. Specifically, some countries have decided to provide fallback exemptions on the APIs. And in some countries, and that's without doing a full assessment on whether these APIs would be compliant with Article 30 and 32 of the. Excuse me. Sorry, getting a little bit confused. Oh, it's 30. So exemptions being provided without doing a full review on whether the dedicated interfaces would comply with Article 30 and 32 of the RTS specifically, that the API would be on par with the customer interface. Now, this exemption would then basically prevent third-party providers from using direct access mechanisms to retrieve the information via the customer interface or initiate a payment via the customer interface. I mean, I'm actually very happy and excited to see the Belgian competent authority to be one of the, basically one of the fewer countries to actually basically make a statement and say, actually, we're only going to exempt once we have compliant APIs. And I'm actually very happy to see that in the Belgian market, because that at least ensures that when the APIs are exempted, that it provides an ecosystem, or at least a foundation for TPPs to innovate, in which we see the opposite happening in some other member states within the EU. So I just wanted to add that as a comment. Thanks.
It's a great comment, and sorry for my note that I'm putting on too many different hats here, from sound engineer to the lights person to the master of ceremony. So sorry for that one. I'm going to have a look online, because people are not just asking for an alcohol bottle like this in their homes, but they would like us to sponsor drinks being sent to them online. So it's actually a nice suggestion, something we're thinking about, because as you know, this is a bit of a rehearsal to our Digital Finance Summit, which also will be very hybrid. And so we're thinking about, should we send a package to your home so everybody on the event at home gets the same type of food and drinks, potentially? You can select the vegan option and the full meat one, whatever you like. But so you can see in the comments, or you can send an email if you have a specific view on that, if we need to pull that off or not, and how much you would be willing to pay for that, because we need sponsors to get that done. So that's a little practical advice here. And the people that did pay to be here tonight, they do get more than this alcohol. They get a drink afterwards and a piece of slice of pizza. So thank you for being here with us. You don't have to vote on the food. Let's have a look at the questions, the ones that are not about food and not about drinks, because we have a lot on our plate here to PSD2. And there was another, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, but can I just...
Yes, you can. I will give you this one again. There we go. We're really going to earn points here from the government. For being so
question. Just to react to what Jan said, we have heard that comment before saying that some NCAs will have exempted way too fast or easily some of the APIs. Just to point out that NCAs are, they have to follow the guidelines issued by the EBA in order to be able to exempt an API. There's a procedure, there are criteria to follow, and it's ultimately, I think, as market players, we do have to, at some point, also rely on the NCAs and their competence of judging the market. So it's not up to individual market players, ASPSPs or TPPs, to judge their compliance. It is the NCA's job, and that's the only, instance that can do that. I understand the concern, but I would point out that the exemption process is not done. In some of the countries that were pointed out by some of your colleagues, it's not a blanket exemption that was given to ASP. Just to react on that. Thank you.
great, thanks for that. So while I serve you the after alcohol, I will hand the mic on to Marc, but I also want to make sure that everybody online, you can join us with a live question. So if you have a camera or at least a microphone on your side, you can put in your hand and we will put you on stage here to really have this feeling of the hybrid event. And while we wait for you to do that, we're going to have Marc make another comment on this one.
Yeah, it's a little bit linked to my wishes for next year. I think that maybe the NCA, considering the very technical aspect of this regulation for banks, should also, or at least the EBA should make sure that NCAs have the means to technically assess those APIs, not just from a legal perspective, but also from a functional perspective. Because this is rather important. I think that when we see today that even some banks don't even test their APIs themselves to put them to production, how can you expect those APIs to sustain businesses? So it's important really to again, accept the fact that this has very deep technical impact, and that's the technical stability, the technical aspect of it is important and needs to be controlled by someone, or at least assessed by someone, by an independent party somewhere.
Thanks for that, Marc. I'm going to take one of the online questions. So Amory, best if you're online and you want to come online, you can ask your questions live. If we don't see you coming with a request into the people on stage, I will read your question out for you. So we're going to count to 3, 2, 1. I'm going to give away part of your question to the panel so they can start thinking about this. What's your take on the It's Me Belgium Mobile ID role in the PSD2 strong customer authentication flows? So they're an important player there, good usability in the Belgian markets. Who wants to take that one first? Yes, something got cut there, sorry.
No, look at the message.
Yes, okay, I didn't get that message. So the most important, so this thing is all about compliance with rules, and then everybody's just interested in alcohol and food. When do we get it? So that much for our hybrid events. We're going to continue. The pizzas will stay warm for another 3 minutes. So we're going to start wrapping up here. Is there another question from the audience here? If not, we're going to invite people online to give their final questions. So it's your moment. If you wanted to know something else, this is the moment to reach out. Alessandra has done her call to action. If you want to support us for the Digital Finance Summit, want to become a sponsor partner, she's your go-to woman. The email address is in the comments, and I'm waiting for the last person standing between us and the pizza, so you have to put it on your hand now. Nobody has any more questions? unique chance to speak straight away to the regulator or the main players in the Belgian markets and getting the European perspective? Well, you get one. Where did we put the microphone?
Yes, Vincent Cheteau from EY. A question on, we understand that a lot of people want to have more transaction data. We understand that PSD2 is about payment accounts. What about savings accounts? Can we still use all the means to aggregate them? What is the position on this type of data in securities account, this type of data? Can we still use it in the meanwhile?
I can answer part of that because I know PSD2 was limited to payment accounts, and especially in Belgium, savings accounts are not considered payment accounts. But I know that on the European level, you can tell us which countries have a different view on that or where that is going. Go ahead.
So yeah, so first of all, obviously, what is a payment account? A payment account is any account where you can deposit money, withdraw money, transfer money. That's the formal European level definition of a payment account. And that definition is applied to different types of payment products or financial products across Europe. So in Belgium, clearly the definition of a payment account does not stretch to a savings account, whereas in some other countries or among some other banks, they have included savings accounts within the scope of PSD2. For instance, Challenger Bank in the Netherlands, for instance, does include savings accounts as part of the PSD2 API. So you have different definitions of what a savings account is, and that's really at the basically at the leisure of the bank to define for themselves and what they would include there. However, everything outside PSD2, you're basically subject to the local legislations within those countries, and in most countries, including the Belgian markets, the access to saving account data has always been possible under, for instance, GDPR and privacy or data privacy regulations. Only in some other countries has there been controversy in terms of the access to this type of data. So everywhere PSD2 does not cover the regulation, there's still space in order to aggregate that information, but via direct access means, access through interfaces that are not regulated by PSD2, and using mechanisms that fall outside of the scope of that particular regulation. So basically, savings data, investment data, mortgage data, etc., that would fall outside the scope of PSD2. And I can provide several examples of customers at Tink that are, for instance, helping users create a full financial picture or transfer the ISIN numbers from their investment accounts from one investment bank to the other investment bank. There are plenty of examples of how basically open banking in its true form is still possible, but it's subject to the local regulations of the country, and it's outside the scope of the implementation of PSD2 within that particular country. So hopefully that gives a little context.
Will you get the last one?
With one small drawback is that you cannot, for those access, of course, benefit from the SCA in itself that PSD2 brings. So it would mean that if you want to link your current account and then your savings account, you would have to use the PSD2 interface for the current account, so going through the SCA of the bank. And then for a reverse engineered connector, we also have some of those in Belgian banks, you would have to go through either an embedded flow, meaning that you would have to ask the TPP for all the data needed to actually link that account, or build your own authorization module or a portal where you would redirect the customer to. So it would still be a weird user experience, I would say, because if I link my current account and then my savings account, I actually see two completely, or at least two, as close as possible, but two different interfaces in order to do the flow, which creates confusion. And can be an obstacle, obviously, for customers because they can think of phishing. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for adding that. So the example you gave earlier on, financial products that have not all been unified, I even think it's an open data sets. That's something new too, that people have, those numbers are public and can be reused by, or it's almost open as a data set. So there's a lot of initiative. We still have a lot of things to overcome. I think that's a little bit the feeling we have tonight. We're going in the right direction. and everybody is aching and really wants to get those other transactional data sets, from social security data to savings to their mortgage information, the insurance maybe. There's a long wish list that we would all like to get in a simple, intuitive way for our end users. But with that, that's for the good to come for, I think, next year's second year anniversary, when we can look back at all the marvelous things that have been generated. So with that, I'm going to thank you all our speakers on stage, and Reinout Temmerman at home. I would say go, for those that are at home, go get something from your fridge, a fresh drink with the heat wave approaching. We're going to enjoy that in the cafeteria next door. Please, safety and comfort, make sure that if any of you get sick, or that we're physically here over the next few days, please reach out to us. You will all get an unfortunate message. You won't know who it is, but you will need to get tested. That's part of us as organizers under the COVID-19. And there are many more events to come. 6th of October, Become and Stay Licensed in Belgium. That's a classroom that we're organizing. In October, there will be a security classroom too. But the main highlight to note in your agenda for the end of the year, 24th of November, we have the Hybrid Digital Finance Summit. So if you like this format and want to stay tuned with your industry and the other players, the Fintech, the TDPs, the banks, make sure you register in time for this event. So it's going to be the world after. I let you imagine afterwards, but there's a beautiful future ahead of us, right? So let's be optimistic about that tonight. All our events are on the Fintech Belgium website, on the event calendar, and our newsletter, of course. I know you're all already on that list, so we'll keep spamming you with our events and the great news of our partners. If you have news, send it to us. Don't forget to share. Like tonight, we had the global launch of the banking SDK. That's the type of thing that you can blast into the audience. You know, you only get one opportunity to get out there. So thank you for being here, and see you at our next event. And I see Alessandra also wants to get the microphone to do the final word to all of you. Get a bit of alcohol first, and there you go.
Just for the people online, don't leave straight away. There is a networking room where you can all meet. And yeah, we leave you 2 minutes to get your own drinks and come back in front of your camera with that and enjoy a little bit of time together. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks very much for and all our speakers for rocking on stage. Have a nice evening.
Yes, now I want the pizza.
There are rules about the pizza. You know, things used to be simple. Think again, you came to a hybrid event.
So I'll invite first maybe the speakers to go